Spreading Across the Continent by Tammy Zambo. The Louisiana Purchase. Before 1804, the United States was made up of 17 states between the East Coast and the Mississippi River. That same year, President Thomas Jefferson sent Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to explore the new United States territory west of the Mississippi, known as the Louisiana Purchase. Americans followed news of Lewis and Clark's expedition with great interest. Soon, many of them decided to discover for themselves what delights lay in that mysterious western land. The expansion of the American West had begun. Even before Lewis and Clark returned, a few adventurous people set out to make their living as beaver trappers in the West. These brave souls were almost all men. They became known as mountain men. Some of them, such as Jim Bridger and Jim Beckworth, became famous. The mountain men moved from stream to stream in search of beavers for the fur trade, exploring and charting trails as they went along. It was these trails that other Americans soon followed as they, too, moved west. Pioneers move west. By 1840, the beaver population had declined, and some of the mountain men returned to the east. Others found different work, such as guiding pioneers over the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Nevada on their way to California or Oregon Territory. In the 1840s, Texas became the 28th state. The United States also claimed territory from the British that spanned Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. Victory in the Mexican War added lands including California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. Easterners wanted to see these regions. More and more Americans headed west in search of exciting new lives. The Pioneer's Journey. Families moving west left in the spring from Omaha, Nebraska, or Independence, Missouri. Each family had a covered wagon, a team of oxen, and several months' worth of supplies. The wagons moved single file in one long caravan along trusted trails. Many followed the Overland Trail, which later split into the Oregon and California trails. Others took the Santa Fe Trail into the Southwest. Most family members, including children, walked alongside their wagon during the day so they could drive cattle and other livestock. They hunted buffalo, elk, and deer along parts of the trail, while their cows provided fresh milk. A churn attached to the wagon made butter as the wagon bumped along. The 2,000-mile journey was long, difficult, and dangerous. Wagon trains traveled at just 2 miles an hour. Pioneers bound for Oregon Territory took about 5 months to arrive at their destination. Bad weather and rough trail conditions were constant threats. Illness was another problem, and graves dotted every trail. Children who began the trip with 2 parents might be orphans by the time their caravan reached Oregon. Gold Fever. In January 1848, a work crew was building a sawmill on the American River in California when a crew member spotted a nugget of gold about half the size of a pea on the ground. The West would never be the same. Word spread quickly that gold had been discovered. People from all over the region soon headed for the California gold fields. When many of them found gold, people from back east and all over the world began to catch gold fever. A large number of people immigrated to California in 1849, which earned them the name 49ers. San Francisco and other California cities were soon home to the most diverse population of people in the world, with European Americans, African Americans, both enslaved and free, and Native Americans. They came from the East Coast as well as from China, Germany, Ireland, Russia, Italy, the West Indies, and Australia. Less than 10% of them were women. Getting the gold. Getting to California from the eastern states took time and effort. Most people traveled overland in covered wagons, although 2 routes by sea were available. One route went 18,000 nautical miles south, around the tip of South America and north again. The other route went only as far as Panama, but then passengers had to cross an isthmus, or a narrow strip of land, by mule and canoe to the Pacific side. There was an additional risk of catching tropical diseases along the way. For a few years, there was plenty of gold to be found through placer mining. This method involved searching on or near the surface of the soil with just a pick, shovel, or pan. By 1852, however, this surface gold was virtually gone. Investors set up mining companies in the gold fields. They used heavy machinery to extract more gold by drilling deep shafts into the ground or by blasting into hillsides. Some 49ers stayed in California and earned a paycheck working for the new mining companies. Others headed home, searching for gold along the way. Some were lucky. Significant gold deposits were found in present-day Colorado, and the city of Denver sprang up as a result. Gold was also found in what are now Montana, Oregon, New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada. The Pony Express. The thousands of people who moved to California during the gold rush longed for news from the East and for letters from family members. Mail service, however, was irregular and could take months. The immigrants began to demand faster, more reliable service. 3 entrepreneurs, William Russell, Alexander Majors, and William Waddell, operated a successful freight service, hauling supplies to settlers and military posts across the West. The 3 men had a daring new idea of setting up a 2,000-mile route for transporting the mail in 10 days or less. Experienced horse riders would carry the mail in relay fashion. The service, the Central Overland California and Pikes Peak Express Company, began on April 3, 1860. It soon became known as the Pony Express. It featured fine, sturdy horses and 80 riders, men and boys, who weighed an average of between 100 and 120 pounds and knew the frontier well. Each rider carried a mailbag draped over his saddle. Because speed mattered so much, the mail could weigh no more than 10 pounds. A half-ounce letter initially cost $5 in gold to mail, about $100 today. Both letters and newspapers were printed on thin tissue paper. The mail was never allowed to stop on its route, regardless of weather or time of day or night. Each rider covered between 75 and 100 miles between relay stations. 2 minutes was allowed every 10 to 15 miles for changing horses. If somehow a horse was lost or killed along the way, its rider had to carry the mail on foot to the next relay station. Sometimes a rider would arrive at a relay station only to find that no rider was there to relieve him. When this happened, the rider, and sometimes the same horse, would press on to the next station, and often the one after that. One rider rode through a blizzard and sub-zero temperatures for more than 36 hours, covering 160 miles before a fresh rider could take over. The arrival of the telegraph. The Pony Express operated for only about 18 months before the telegraph made it obsolete. This technology, already used in the East, transmitted messages electrically along wires. Now it took mere minutes to do what the Pony Express did in 10 days. On October 24, 1861, the extension of telegraph lines to the West Coast was complete. 2 days later, California newspapers reported that our little friend the pony is to run no more. The long drive. Even before Americans began heading to the far west, thousands of people settled in Texas and established cattle ranches. Texas was perfect for raising cattle because the wide open terrain provided plenty of room for grazing. Ranchers raised far more cattle than they could sell locally, so they needed new markets. Easterners wanted to buy beef, but getting cattle to the nearest eastern market was very difficult. In the West, though, cattle could be driven in herds across the plains. The California gold rush was a prime opportunity for Texas ranchers because the large number of 49ers demanded more beef than local ranchers could supply. During the 1850s, more than 100,000 cattle were driven from Texas to San Francisco. The peak of cattle driving, though, came after the Civil War, as the eastern railroads began branching farther west. Cattle were now driven north from Texas to towns such as Sedalia and Dodge City, Missouri, and Abilene, Kansas. There the cattle were shipped by rail to Chicago, Illinois, the center of the meatpacking industry. Cattle drives were usually led by teams of cowboys rather than by the ranchers themselves. A team was made up of a trail boss and 8 to 10 cowboys for a herd of between 2,000 and 3,000 cattle. A team also had a cook who drove the chuck wagon and a wrangler who took care of the cowboys' horses. Most cowboys were European American, but Mexican and African American cowboys were also common. Keeping the cattle calm and headed in the right direction was the cowboys' primary duty. The cattle were nervous and could stampede at the slightest sound or unexpected movement. They panicked easily while crossing rivers, too, and could begin to mill or move in a tight circle until those in the center went under. Cowboys broke up stampedes and mills. They tracked down strays and coaxed stragglers. They took turns keeping watch through the night, too, so they got little sleep. After months on the trail, a team reached the town of its destination. There, the cowboys got a bath and a new set of clothes. Ranches move north. Between 1865 and 1890, about 10 million cattle were driven north from Texas. Gradually, though, the open range was fenced off. Ranchers spread north into the prairies of Nebraska, North and South Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana. Cattle drives shortened to a few days rather than months, but the winters up north were snowy and cold. On the trail, cowboys had to find grazing areas where the wind had blown away the snow, and chop holes in the ice so the cattle could get water to drink. Sunlight on the snow was blinding and also caused the cowboys to get sunburned. Frost cracked their lips and skin. The glory days of the cowboy were over. The Transcontinental Railroad. Before the Civil War, settlers west of the Missouri River began demanding that the railroad be extended to the West Coast. Congress authorized a transcontinental railroad in 1862, and 2 companies began to build it in 1863 from opposite ends of the country. The Union Pacific, employing 10,000 men, worked its way west from Omaha, Nebraska. The Central Pacific, employing 11,000 men, worked its way east from Sacramento, California. The height of the Civil War interrupted construction, but it resumed once the war was over. Each crew faced immense challenges. Union Pacific workers were attacked by Native Americans who controlled the land. Central Pacific workers had to blast 15 tunnels through the Sierra Nevada, which was a very dangerous job. The crew members were persistent. Union Pacific workers were mostly immigrants from Ireland, but some were former Confederate soldiers, Mexicans, Germans, English, and former enslaved people. Thousands of Central Pacific workers were Chinese immigrants who had tried looking for gold in California. Each crew raced to see which could lay track over the most ground. Homesteaders on the Great Plains. A new period of settlement by pioneers began in 1862, when Congress passed the Homestead Act. This act provided that any person who claimed a plot of public land, a homestead, on the Great Plains and farmed it for 5 years would be given 160 acres. The Transcontinental Railroad in 1869 lured settlers farther west, and farms sprung up all across the Midwest. Nearly 2 million people moved to the plains in the 1870s and tirelessly worked to improve their farms. The homesteaders built their houses out of sod. They plowed their fields and dug wells or walked to nearby streams for water. They hoped for favorable weather to grow strong crops, and they started over when grasshoppers or hail or drought destroyed those crops. They tended to each other in sickness and lent a hand to settlers in need. Some women became self-taught midwives, helping other women during pregnancy and childbirth. Their lives were hard, but they did everything they could to survive and even thrive. Settlers and the environment. The American pioneer expansion into the West left scars on the environment. 30 million or so buffalo once roamed the plains. In the 1860s, however, the buffalo had to compete with the pioneers' livestock for grassland. In addition, more and more people hunted buffalo simply for sport, and making leather from their hides became a big business. In 1 2-year period in Kansas alone, between 1.5 and 3 million buffalo were killed. The land, too, suffered. After California's surface gold disappeared, hydraulic mining was used to tear riverbeds apart to search for more gold. By the 1860s, people could see that hydraulic mining was destroying the rivers, but it took decades to end the practice. A European, James Bryce, wrote about destruction such as this: "Why, in your hurry to subdue and utilize nature, squander her splendid gifts?" Luckily, some Americans were just as concerned. In 1872, Congress created the world's first national park, Yellowstone National Park, to preserve the beauty of the area. In 1892, John Muir and other environmentalists formed the Sierra Club to preserve the Yosemite Valley and the surrounding Sierra Nevada. Other national parks followed.